Welcome to the OR Today webinar series. We're excited to have over 100 registered attendees for today's webinar. The third annual OR Today Live Surgical Conference will be held August 27 through 29 at the Hyatt Regency Reston, Washington, D.C. We will award an OR Today Live tote bag to the first attendee that can tell us what is the tallest building in Washington, D.C. Use the question feature on your webinar dashboard to answer this trivia question now. While you're answering, I want to remind all of the attendees that today's webinar is eligible for one continuing education hour. To obtain your certificate, you must complete the post-webinar survey, which will appear immediately on your computer screen at the end of today's call. If you do not receive the survey, please email us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. All right, and the winner of the OR Today Live tote bag is Allison Jones. Congratulations. The correct answer is the Washington Monument. Registration details for the OR Today Live Surgical Conference are available online at ortodaylive.com. Our presenter today is David Taylor, Director of the CVOR at Methodist Hospital in San Antonio, Texas. David, you may begin whenever you're ready.
Hello, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here with you this afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this OR Today webinar. As I said, my name is David Taylor, and I want to give you a little background of who I am and kind of where I'm coming from, and then how I came about this presentation itself. And we'll explain a lot of that throughout the presentation as well. But I started my life here at Methodist Hospital, which is in San Antonio, Texas, as a CVOR director, as an interim change agent, if you will. I've worked in consulting for a very long time, and prior to my consulting career, I was an Army officer in the Nurse Corps and retired in 2009. About 5 years after my Army retirement, I traveled the country working with different hospitals to help them transform their operating rooms, central sterile supplies, their SPD departments, etc. And through that, I gained a lot of insight. So I traveled from Georgia to Alaska, Texas to the northern tip of Minnesota, California to the East Coast. So I spent a lot of time at different locations and experienced a lot of different cultures throughout the United States. And by doing that, I was able to understand a little bit of why some of the things that we're experiencing in healthcare and having so many problems in healthcare as we try to make changes. So hopefully today you'll get a better perspective of what to do within your organization, as well as finding energy within yourself to kind of transform some of the changes that you may be needing to do or implement into your operating rooms or surgical service lines. Our title today is Harnessing Organizational Energy for Transformational Change. I have no declared affiliations that could be perceived as a potential conflict of interest today. And as we get started, you know, healthcare has changed so much over the last 10 years and continues to change. So before we really get too far into the process, what I want to do is show you a video that I think helps to kind of set the tone for today. So please take a moment to enjoy this video.
A medical dream comes true under the drive of industrialist Henry Kaiser, who holds the plans of the ultra-modern hospital designed by Dr. Sidney Garfield, director of the Kaiser Foundation. From the admissions office on, everything is streamlined and expedited. The patient's record reaches the doctor before he does. This is the last word in the combination X-ray machine and fluoroscope, imported from Holland at a cost of $25,000. Every portion of the body through 180 degrees can be photographed. In the operating room, the first light of its kind is installed. No portion of an operation is ever in shadow, nor is the expectant father forgotten. Here he can get the news officially and suffer under the most comfortable circumstances possible. And for mother, well, she has only to call for her baby, and baby comes sliding through a wall in a drawer-like bassinet for a little visit with the new mother. In this $2 million institution, doors are opened by remote control, and on the single floor, patients are easily moved from place to place. Dream grounds for a dream hospital. The answer to a doctor's prayer.
Yeah, the answer to a nurse's prayer as well. How do you like that pool action, taking our patients out on their beds out into the balcony? So very different today's healthcare world, and some of us are old enough to understand that smoking lounge where the dads were. We've changed a lot over the last couple decades and continue to change. And healthcare, as you will, is kind of like this. Our hospital systems are getting larger. The systems are continually growing. So more and more healthcare corporations are starting to buy up smaller hospitals within their region and even across the United States. In fact, HCA owns hospitals in Europe. So part of this strategy, right, is to balance out the needs. But these behemoths continue to grow and grow and grow. And the Well Run Hospital takes a lot of different people, whether it is surgical services or the folks that support surgical services, but it always takes people to do the job. And it only takes one or two employees or employee groups that can kind of take what you're trying to do well and make that very difficult. I'm going to take a pencil here, a little drawing tool, to try and articulate a little bit of something here. If you take a look at the graph, I have a little pen here up the upper center. And you're going to see an employee here who's losing his head at the factory, okay? And then down at the bottom center, you'll see the pen at the bottom of your screen. You see two employees doing the same thing. They're grabbing a box with the ball, and the ball continues to fall out. The interesting thing here is they continually do the same thing. They don't change. And that change is what we experience in healthcare, is why we can't seem to get better than what we were. Healthcare is considered the third leading cause of death now, and there's been an article published within the last couple years that articulate how many people actually died as a result of healthcare and what we do. So I think this transformational change topic is really poignant in today's industry, but what are we going to do as an industry to change? And a little difficulty here, we're not moving. So excuse me for 1 second as we... Right. I apologize for the pause. Here we go. So before I get too far into the change, I want to talk a little bit about kind of our nursing shortages and what's going on in the country. Currently, we have over 3.1 million RNs that make up the largest segment of the healthcare workforce. As we look at the 3.1 million, nursing is also one of the fastest growing, and this speed in which we are growing is actually faster than any other profession out there, and the fastest growing healthcare profession when you consider nursing as an individual group. So nurses, if you look at the bar graph on your screen, is at 16%. That is faster than all industries combined. But when you look at the healthcare, all diagnostic and treating practitioners, we are leading that charge. But what's happening is, despite this growth, the demand is outpacing supply. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, we're about 1.2 million vacancies are going to emerge between 2014 and 2022. By 2025, though, this shortfall is going to continue to grow as we are anticipating 500,000 tenured RNs planning on retiring by 2022. This is going to cause one of the largest nursing shortages experienced since the 1960s. So it's pretty astronomical when you think about what we're doing and what's happening to our profession nationally. To kind of demonstrate this again is to look at a map of the United States, and this is the total number of professionally active nurses throughout. The three states at the bottom that are in dark blue, California, Texas, and Florida, have the least amount of nurses per capita than any other state. In fact, California and Texas are ranked 45th and 46th respectively. Per capita is the number of nurses per 1,000 patient population. And when you consider the state of Texas, for example, the sheer land mass, it's hard enough to find nurses to fulfill the job requirements within urban areas, your cities, if you will. Can you imagine how difficult it is to fulfill those healthcare professional needs in the rural spaces? So this is just a little example of how large and how fast nursing is growing, but also the needs as we continue to move into the right position, to hire the right people to take care of the patients that we so dearly care for. But what does that have to do really with the transformation? Well, I think it has a lot to do with it, because when you look at the employee base of what healthcare is, what nursing is, we have to really start looking at engagement. And what excites me about engagement is some research that I did a couple years ago, and that's what really kind of formulated this. You know, the consulting experience that I shared with you, moving on with looking at current studies. Engagement has a huge impact on what we do. In fact, global engagement has shown some significant numbers that impact the ability to get things done. In fact, globally, all workforce jobs, if you will, have a 63% disengagement, with an additional 24% of those global employees actively disengaged, which only leaves us about 13% of the global workforce doing the job. This actually translates into about 900 million disengaged workers and an additional 340 actively disengaged workers across the globe. So pretty astronomical when you think 87% of us are either not doing our job or trying actively not to do our job. I wanted to look a little bit further, and about 2 years later, I came across U.S. management engagement. Now, again, this is all workforce managers, so it encompasses all professions. And it shows that only about 35% of managers are actively engaged every day, where you have 51% disengaged and 14% actively disengaged. You can only imagine when you go to work, if you're not in a leadership role, kind of the experiences of what's happening in your organization and why things don't transform. If we have global workforce and U.S. management that's actually disengaged, it's alarming. But when you start looking at the actively disengaged, these are managers who are actively trying not to do their job. It's no wonder we get nothing done. In fact, this is costing our U.S. economy $77 to $96 billion on average for the disengaged management. And if you incorporate the actively disengaged, this climbs to nearly $400 billion. Imagine what you could do with $400 billion in this country. What diseases could we cure? What educational advancements could we make? It's just astounding. But through my research, I knew that healthcare was different. It had to be. In fact, I know what I do every day, and I know what my colleagues do every day, and we're working very hard to take care of the patients that we have that come through our departments and come to our facilities, and that get to experience who we are. But the reality was that the nursing engagement was no different. In fact, nursing engagement was worse. 60% of nurses were actively disengaged, with an additional 7% that were just disengaged. So 33% of us are doing our jobs while 2/3 are not. So it's no wonder we have so many causes and collapses, falls with injury, surgical site wound infections, retained foreign bodies. It's astronomical to think. What really concerned me about this research was that nurse engagement was actually lower than any other healthcare profession. This included the non-clinical frontline staff. So this was the impetus of this presentation and why we're here together today. I'm going to let this slide sit with you for a few seconds and let you read through it. So those are the actively disengaged managers and employees who are hiding out in their offices and in their cubby holes or wherever they're doing and actually not doing their job. It's kind of funny when you think about it, when you can laugh about it, but when we go to work every day, we all know those individuals, whether it's our colleagues or whether it's our peers, who are actually not functioning at a high level. So how do we get there? How do we make these changes? How do we transition our culture and move to a better direction? Well, I think it starts with us as individuals. And we work very hard in nursing. The difficulty in nursing is we never get a day off, if you will. Our patients are constantly coming to us, whether you're in a surgical environment or whether you're in a med-surg environment where you receive patients from your surgical units. How many of you actually have cold beds? Most of the time our throughput is difficult, so as soon as a bed gets available, we're putting another patient into it. So we work hard, but what do we do at home? Are we actually resting? Do we have work-life balance? Well, I would say we don't. Based on the statistics and the research that I have found, there's $224 billion that is owed by U.S. businesses in unused PTO. So we have lots of vacation time that we don't take. We know that individuals who work at least 11 hours a day or longer are 67% more likely to develop heart disease than those who actually work a 7 or 8 hour day. I don't know about you, but the last time I worked a 7-hour day was probably when I was a teenager working at a local grocery store. Productivity declines drastically also after you toil more than 55 hours a week. So when you combine the actively disengaged and the disengaged workforce, plus the number of hours we're actually working, it only shows that the numbers that I showed you in the previous slides are really holding true, that we're not getting much done, and our patients are suffering for it. There's some senior leaders in different industries that are starting to adopt new approaches to this work-life balance concept. And the reason they're doing it, the big why, if you will, is because they realize that their employees are less productive when they're exhausted. So they're actually forcing them to take time off. And why are they doing it? Well, like I said, we're working too hard. Most of us will eat breakfast or lunch or dinner or all of our meals and snacks at our desk. We do our emails and phone calls or webinars or everything else when we have those opportunities. We check our emails when we're in bed, when we're in the car, because you know you're not supposed to text and email when you're in the car, but we do. And we never seem to hit this pause button. We're always seeming to running full speed. Well, according to Gallup, where a lot of this research can come from, or has come from, the hot topic among 40% of our full-time workforce is we're logging too much hours per week. We're working way too much. And the hot topic is this work-life balance. And how do we balance in the separation between what we currently do and our expectations at our job and what we actually take home with us? You know, when they hire us or we hire employees, it's for 2,080 hours a year. The expectation is you can get that job done in that time frame, and that's how they build our salaries and our benefits. But the reality is there's so many other assigned duties that we go long beyond that 2,080 hours. So work-life balance is key. If we're going to change the cultures and transform our units and departments, we're going to have to find a way to balance work and pleasure. I'm not sure about you, and I know we're coming out of winter, at least most of the country is, but I'd rather be on that beach with a Corona, just relaxing when I'm on vacation, not worrying about my email or my text. So I'd like to share with you kind of my concept here is what you accept is what you teach. If you're going to accept the fact that checking your email at 9 o'clock at night or doing your texts constantly or at 5 a.m. when somebody texts you, you have to answer it, then that's what you accept, and that's what you're teaching. You teach your employees that, you teach yourself that, you teach your peers that. So I think we need to come up with a new paradigm shift so that we can kind of grow ourselves, but also grow our departments and move ourselves in a different direction. So we can start this journey by beginning at the top, whether that's your administrative levels, your COOs, your CNOs, CEOs, etc., or if that's your director levels. But starting at the top. And the question really is, do you walk the walk? Because everybody can talk, but are you actually doing the things and demonstrating the things that you want to demonstrate to improve the employee's perception of what your expectations are? So walking the walk is the single most effective employee engagement strategy out there. If the employees see the leaders demonstrating these characteristics and behaviors, the culture is going to begin to change. A good example of walking the walk or talking the talk is when you have, as a leader, when you have employees who are not performing at a high level, those employees will bring down your high performers because the high performers feel that nobody ever does anything about the bad employees. So if the bad employees can get away with that, then why do I have to work so hard? And then you have this trickle down. Well, the same thing applies that if you start holding people equally accountable, and or you have to move towards a termination of an employee because they're not fitting the culture, they're not kind of driving the mission, the vision, the values, then these good employees, these high performers, will start to perform even more because they feel that the leader is finally doing what's necessary. In some companies where leaders model these desires and these behaviors, you have 55% more engagement and 53% more focus and more likely to stay with the company. So the key here with these two numbers and these statistical evaluation is that you start getting these employees to start doing things and changing who you are from within. Are you a transparent leader? Do you actually share with your employees the things that need to be shared? It's okay to trust your employees with some sensitive information. It helps them give a sense of what their investment is to the company. Now, I know there's super secret meetings that happen because we can't share everything, and I know there's HR issues. But what are you actually sharing with your employees? Because if you don't share much and you're not very transparent, let me tell you now that they already know, because the rumor mill is about 90% accurate. But then with that 90% accuracy, they create their own world, and then they start driving some things that are inaccurate, which can be very, very detrimental to your units and departments. So start creating this transparency so it's an us versus them mentality, and help them to start understanding where the company is, where the company's going, and where you want to be, not just today, tomorrow, but maybe in a year or 5 years from now. Part of this cultural transformation is involving your personnel in collaborative leadership. How do we incorporate our employees into the decision-making process? I like team participation because even though I have over 30 years experience in surgical services, it doesn't mean I know everything. If you have a PhD, you're a CNO, you got 5 other leadership certifications, does that make you the end-all be-all? I don't think so. I think what really happens is if you incorporate a team concept where your end users are actually doing the things that need to be done necessarily to get the job done, but also making the decisions on how those jobs get done, or the types of equipment, or the processes that you put in place, will help you to not only get the job done better, but have a better collaborative and more incorporated opportunity for employees to feel like they're valued. So creating these multi-level collaborative task forces are really key. And it's not just made up of, say, nurses or just surgical technicians, but it's made up of everybody that has an impact on that patient or that process. This may be sterile processing, may be orderlies or perioperative service technicians. It may even be your EVS housekeeping staff who support you in some way in the operating room. So consider task forces as part of a way to grow. Task forces are short-lived. They're usually 90 days, maybe 120, depending on how difficult the problem is. But if you let these frontline employees drive your cultural initiatives, you're going to start seeing your cultural transformation happen much quicker and more effectively. Leaders should always be available and approachable. I don't know how many times as a consultant traveling across the country I found leaders locked in their rooms with do not disturb signs on their doors. What was even more interesting is they bragged about their open door policy, yet employees never felt welcome to knock on their door or interrupt them during the day. So not much ever got accomplished. Leaders who are available and approachable, there's two ways to manifest this, right? One, you need to be accessible and visible around the office, not just keeping your door open, but actually getting out there and working with the employees. Now, I'm not saying directors should be doing it all the time, but there's nothing wrong with putting on some scrubs and working with your employees, mopping floors with them, taking out the trash, and kind of getting to know what they know and what they're willing to share and say. You know, there's this thing called the Hawthorne effect. When you watch your employees from a distance, they actually change their behaviors so that everything looks good and modified to please you, versus actually sitting down and understanding what they're doing. What's really interesting about this is, and I don't know how many years ago this happened, but the Undercover Boss series, if some of you have seen that, is kind of based on this. It's really senior, very senior leaders. It's the owners or the CEOs of these companies who really kind of get down into the weeds to understand their company more, and by doing so, they can actually transform, you know, their organizations, their companies, become more profitable, have better engaged and more satisfied employees. Second thing to do is really to recognize the contributions and achievements of your employees. You know, there's nothing better than to get a pat on the back from your boss or from your supervisor in a public forum. When we recognize these individuals for doing the great job and the great work that they're doing, it also motivates their peers. And in subsequent slides, you're going to see some of these things and how it kind of drives people when they're publicly recognized. Do you say thank you? Now, I know there's a lot of organizations out there that follow Studer. And I like the Studer organization, and I believe in many, if not all, of their principles. But saying thank you is so simple. We oftentimes forget to say thank you. In fact, I will tell you that many senior leaders will write in many thank you notes. And what's interesting is they bring these stacks of notes to their meetings, and you see them constantly writing thank you cards. Well, I don't know about you, but when I write a thank you card, I really like it to be very quiet, and I like to be contemplative in what I say, because I want there to be some meaning, some substance behind my thank you card. What's important, though, is when employees see senior leaders writing all these thank you cards, thank you, 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 it kind of diminishes the reason behind the purpose. You know, employees are very supportive when their supervisors are recognizing them and saying thank you for the work that they do. In fact, 1.3 times more likely to stay with the company, and they become 67% more engaged when you actually say thank you in a meaningful way. So the thing that I would challenge the audience today, all of those of you who are on this webinar, is think about what you're doing with your thank you cards or how you're thanking your employees. There's 1,000 different books out there that will tell you, but I'm going to give you one quick little strategy that I think will really impress upon how important an employee feels when you do this. A few years ago, I wrote a thank you card not to the employee, but to the employee's spouse. See, we were working really, really hard, and I was working my manager to death. She worked alongside me. We got to work 4, 5 o'clock every morning, and there was days we didn't leave until 10 p.m. We had a lot of heavy lifting to do. And yes, I could have wrote her a thank you card, and I thanked her many, many times. And yes, I did write her thank you cards over that period. But I just felt it wasn't enough. So I went to my HR folks, and I got a $50 gift card, and I got a nice card from my stack of personal thank you cards that I use for friends, family, and others. And I wrote a nice contemplative thank you note to her husband. And I thanked him for allowing her to spend so much time with us at the organization taking care of patients. You know that 2 years later, I went to their house. I think it was over a holiday kind of gathering, and I seen that thank you card was on their fireplace mantle. And when I noticed it, you know, I was proud. I was proud that it was so important that, one, they kept it. But when I looked at it, he approached me and he thanked me personally for sending it to him, and he was so proud of it that he wanted to display it for all of his friends and family to see, because for the first time he really understood what his wife did every day at work. He knew she was a nurse. He knew she took care of patients, but he didn't know how important that role was. So I would challenge you not just to write a thank you card to your employees, but consider writing one to their families. A way to recognize folks also, and this is kind of that mantra of saying thank you, is how do we recognize people for doing great things? A few years ago, I created the Surgical Services Wall of Fame. And the Surgical Services Wall of Fame was a way to recognize not just my OR staff or my physicians, but it was also a way to recognize those who supported my department. And this included biomedical maintenance, EVS, the food caterers, whoever did something in my department to impact my patient's care. The first time I did this, I actually did 5 employees. Well, I did 4 employees and a physician, but one of the employees was a caterer who supported my doctor's lounge with all the food. And you know how doctors can be. They're not very supportive. They say, you know, we don't have enough soda pop, we don't have enough crackers, we don't have enough chips, and oh, by the way, this is cold. So they never seem to be happy. Well, this lady worked for our organization for a little over 30 years, and she actually did a whole lot more behind the scenes that anybody knew. In fact, she was a very quiet person, and very much an introvert. So she didn't say much, but nobody ever recognized her. Nobody ever really kind of seen what she did or on a daily basis, or what importance she brought to the organization. Well, I watched her for a while, and I decided I'm going to put her up on the Wall of Fame. So I take 5x7 photos. I take pictures of everybody, and I have 5x7 photos developed, and I have them in my in an office file. And then I have this little template that I create. So I wrote up a little something on her, and it can be anything. But when you do the write-up, you know, write up about what they do at work, but also write up a little bit about what they do as individuals. You know, this young lady actually sang in the church choir. She had like 15 grandchildren. She was a very proud woman. After she's seen her photograph up on the wall, and it's in a very public space, she got very, very embarrassed at first, but you could tell she was very proud too. At the end of the month, we took all the pictures down, and we go to a presidential hospital ceremony where the president gives out awards and information and thank yous. And in this, the president called me up, and I read the plaque, and I invited her up. Well, we let her know about this in advance, that, you know, we were going to give her the plaque. What we didn't know was she invited her husband, all of her children, and half her grandchildren were there. She was so proud to receive this simple framed photograph of herself, and that she was a part of this Wall of Fame. I was, I guess, dumbfounded in some ways that I didn't realize how impactful that would be. What was interesting is, after a couple months, there was a lot of people who really wanted to be on the Wall of Fame because they really knew they were working hard and they were hoping to be recognized. We didn't go more than 5 a month, but we changed it every month. There was 5 new people. And what was the cost? You know, the photograph I took with my phone, I uploaded it to Costco. It cost me, I think, 15 cents or 20 cents for a 5x7, and 10 minutes worth of writing on this template. So a great way to recognize staff or folks that support your group, your department, your service line. Another way that I found to recognize staff is through a wall of excellence, celebrating excellence. And what I did here was I created another banner, and these banners are about 10 inches wide, 10 feet long. You put your hospital logo, as you can see by the graphic on your screen. But what I did is I asked all my employees who were certified to come in with their color certificate for their certification, and I made a color photostatic copy of it so they could take their original home. And in a nice frame, I put it underneath this banner, and we would list everybody who had a certification. The first time I did this was in California. I did some consulting in a small town in Central California, and we had 2 people certified, myself and our OR manager. Within 9 months of that consulting assignment, we ended up with 8 more nurses in that department certified. The fact that we actually put people up there and started recognizing their nursing excellence, the extra steps that they're taking to become great at their job, it started like a wildfire. Everybody wanted to be certified. Everybody wanted to be a part of this. And what you're going to see on the screen is it's not just CNOR. It can be your CRNFAs. It can be your CSTs. It can be your folks from sterile processing. Or you can create separate banners for separate departments. If you have the wall space and you can do it, put everybody up there. Now, what I did initially when there was only 2 of us up there is I created another picture frame, but I created a placard or a card, if you will, to frame that said, "Are you the next to receive your certification?" And once we had 3, 4, 5, 6 different nurses up there and a couple different CSTs, those little placards came down because we had so many people up there that were actually engaged with learning again, engaged with getting certified. And it really started to transform who we were as a little organization. Bringing your A game is really something that was an accident. You can see that it's one of those little rubber wristbands. And I started this in one of my hospitals that was having a lot of struggles. This hospital had 14 OR directors in 10 years. So that's more than 1 director every year. So this team was really beat down. They didn't feel really good about themselves. They picked on each other all the time. It was really, really a tough situation. So in my morning huddles, what I did is I took this bracelet at the end of my huddle and I gave it to one of the employees who I seen the day prior doing something really good with a patient. And I recognized this employee right there in the huddle in front of everybody. But I said, there's a catch. You have to recognize one of your colleagues tomorrow. So in the beginning of the huddles, it took a little bit of time to get these things kind of rolling and moving. But once we got it rolling and moving, they would remind me at the end of the huddle that they wanted to pass it forward. Well, one day the nurse who was going to pass it forward or pay it forward wasn't going to be there. She was going to be on vacation. So she asked me to pass this forward for her and explained why she wanted to pass it to this employee. It was very heartfelt, but what was funny was the bracelet she gave me that we started with had broke. So the team actually sutured it together because they wanted to continue this tradition. Knowing that it was working and knowing that the bracelet was getting some wear and tear, I went ahead and bought a whole bunch. And I think they're like 20 cents a piece when you buy a couple hundred at a time. The bracelet color is based on the hospital colors. So if your hospital is kind of a green or a beige or whatever, the main color is, you can do that. And then you do your lettering in any color you want in any font. But I found this to be very successful, and employees really love to recognize one another. Are you an authentic leader? Do you actually do the things that are meaningful, that are from your heart and soul? Companies are made up of people, not products, machines, and property. And yet in healthcare, we're all people. Our patients, the product and the widgets we care for are people, and yet sometimes we disassociate that human space. So I want to encourage you to be an authentic leader, be an authentic person, because those of you who show your human side, you're going to have a much better outcome in helping transform your culture and helping driving some of the initiatives that you want to drive? Are you a flexible leader? Are you somebody who really thinks outside the box? I often talk to some of my colleagues and they say, well, in healthcare we can't just be flexible. It's really hard. I got to run 12-hour shifts, or I have to have 10s, and I have to give people extra time off, and I need this or I need that, because they're so overwhelmed they don't have time to really think through it. The two stories I'd like to share with you about being flexible is, what does your workforce look like? I was at another consulting opportunity where I had 60% of my nurses were due to retire within the next 2 years. That was an HR nightmare and recruiting nightmare, because how were you going to replace all of these nurses? One of my nurses was 62 years old. And if you've been in the OR as many years as her, you know how difficult it can be with the heavy equipment, heavy instrumentation, lifting patients, moving patients, the hard work, the call. I can go on. But she was exhausted. She didn't want to retire, but she couldn't physically do the job anymore. So she was afraid that she couldn't go to part-time. So I got with her, and being transparent, I pulled a position control and we started looking at some opportunities. So I was able to maneuver her to a part-time position, so a 0.5 FTE, and then I was able to hire somebody else into that 0.5 FTE, and kind of did a job sharing opportunity with her. But what was interesting was she was able to do some things in her life that fulfilled her professionally, as well as, met her financial needs. And then as we continued down this road, we ended up moving her to just a lunchtime relief person. So she came in just enough time to give all the nurses lunch, and then she went home. The end of the story here is she worked until she was almost 70 years old before she actually retired. Imagine losing such a wealth of knowledge and opportunity for her to mentor, coach, and educate the future nurses of that organization. So being flexible isn't, difficult. It's sometimes just creative. The other thing is, the other story that I wanted to share with being flexible is, what do you do with some of your employees? Now, the operating room, we start early, we end late, lots of elective, lots of emergency, weird cases at all hours. But what can you do? Well, I had a nurse who just had her second baby, and she was on FMLA. She needed a little bit more time, and yes, it was kind of a burden and difficult, but we kind of managed through not having her. But there was moments when she came back to work where she needed a little extra time, because her support system was her mother, but her mother became very ill at the latter part of her FMLA. So she needed to take some extra time off. Her colleagues were very supportive of her, so it wasn't a problem. But what I did is, instead of just giving her the day off, is I didn't give her the day off, but I let her work from home. So I gave her a lot of things that we were trying to do administratively with the expectation that they would be accomplished, and then she would honestly tell me how many hours it took. Now, in my mind, I knew how many hours it was probably going to take to do the work, so when she came back and told me, it kind of matched up with what I was thinking, so we moved forward. I was able to get some work done. I was able to give her time off. She's still an employee with me today. But if I wouldn't have been able to do some of these things with her, she potentially could have went part-time or quit, which meant I had a void to fill, because she had some family needs, a new baby and a sick mother. So as a leader, and as a person who's trying to transform their culture, it's very important that we continue to move things forward. We talk about hiring traits and behaviors for our organization. We always talk about having these peer interviews and do these people meet the cultural needs of our organization. I would challenge you and say, hire people who are better than your culture, because if you're trying to transform something, it makes no sense to bring somebody in that's the same culture you're currently dealing with. So hire people who are better and are going to help you enhance and improve who you are. Are you engaging from day one? We fill out mountains of paperwork. We sit through these canned PowerPoint presentations, In the old days, what did we do? We sat in a room with 10 3-ring binders with all the policies and procedures, and at the end of the day, your boss would come to you when you're glassy-eyed and half asleep and drooling on yourself, you would go to work. Now we just stick you in a 3 or 4 day or a week-long nursing orientation. Half of it doesn't matter. You're working with people that maybe you'll never see, and it's really a surefire way to really kind of kill your engagement right off the bat. I would say flip it. Bring your employees directly to your organization so they can get ingrained with who you guys are. They can start developing their relationships with their colleagues and peers, and then feed in the nursing orientation or the orientation programs that you have in your organization over a period of, say, 2 or 3 weeks. This way they can get fully ingrained with you and your people. Do you volunteer together? Are you doing good things with other people throughout your organization? Do you do things with your people? And how are they inspired outside of your work environment? Are you playing and having fun together? You know, fun breaks up routines and encourages creativity and collaboration. You know, there's all kinds of stuff that you can do. Does your organization let you have a dress down day? Can you have a crazy hair day? Can you have certain themes at certain holidays that will help drive some of this fun? Yes, you're all right. You're not supposed to have a dog in your OR, but that's Spot, our seeing eye dog, so he's allowed. The reality is, what are you doing to create enthusiasm in your organization? You know, are you having fun? Do you have a esprit de corps where you're building a cohesive team? You know, some of the recognition programs I brought to you, but you all have ideas, so what are you doing to try and bring that to light? And are you proud of what you do? Do you instill pride and ownership? You know, esprit de corps is easy, right? Well, the definitions are. But do you have a common spirit? Do you inspire enthusiasm and devotion? Do your staff have a strong regard or common loyalty for each other? Because if they don't, then we really need to start looking at some of the things that maybe I presented today and try to drive that. The photographs that you see here on your screen, in the upper left and the bottom left is me in a hat. The hospital that I worked at several years ago had a hat contest the OR never participated in. This hat contest was something that kind of was a happy time here in San Antonio. It was during our fiesta. Well, we took second place that year, and that second place helped us to kind of grow as an organization within our little cells, and it helped us to kind of get inspired for each time the hat contest went on every year for fiesta. The gentleman in the middle is Robert. He's a good friend of mine, one of my best employees. When I first got to this job here, he wore a hat that said, "I leave at 3." How do you compete with that? Well, one day Robert came to me, and I didn't quite see the side of his left side of his face, and as he turned, he said, "David, I'm really sick. I think I'm going to go home." And when he turned to me, I was really concerned because Robert's an older gentleman. I said, "You know, Robert, what's the matter?" He goes, "I think I have pink eye." The gentleman on the right is Joseph. Our secretaries that day were really feeling down, so he put a patch on his eye, and you can see the Scotch tape there. And he started talking like a pirate to cheer him up. And over time, they were getting cheered up, and he actually had a parrot put on his shoulder because, well, they wanted him to have a parrot because he was a pirate. So collaborating, having fun together, really when you transform your culture, everybody starts to get engaged and start doing different things so that we can laugh through some of the stressors. Another organization that I worked at as a consultant, we did a hoop contest. On your left, top and bottom, are 2 nuns at this organization. It was a Catholic hospital, and they instigated this hooping contest with me, and we had everybody who came to our OR hoop that day. The top right and bottom right is our COO and CNO respectively. And the CNO was so good at it, she was hooping for like 20 minutes straight, and there was like no stopping her. So the lady in the top middle said, "I can do one better," and grabbed 2 hoops. That totally transformed our day because not just the staff, but administration, our physicians, laboratory, a lot of folks got involved that day. It was really fun. What is the secret? Well, ladies and gentlemen, there is no secret. There really isn't. You want to know the types of things that are going to help your employees feel more engaged and do things? Is ask them. What do they want to do? You know, you might be surprised at how simple it is. It really comes down to how you treat people. If you treat people with respect and you treat them well, they're going to treat each other better and they're going to treat you better, and then our patients ultimately have a better experience. You know, compassion, mutual respect, kindness, and flexibility doesn't cost a thing. But you know, if you want to, you can hire me as a consultant and I'll come in to help you fix your culture. But the reality is, you just got to try. These are some slides. I normally don't read all of my bullets, but I want to read this to you. And it was something that I found on a website that said why humanizing the workplace is important. And I realized that there's a spelling error here, but this is actually quoted from the website. In our quest for productivity, we have moved too far to the other end where results matter more than people. When we can draw the best out of people we work with, they have the capacity to produce results that are far exceeding projections. This can only happen if organizations hire leaders who can harness the power of the people they employ and draw out the best in them. So why is this important? Let me show you this quick video and we'll finish up tonight. So I have watched that video a couple hundred times, and it affects me the same way. What we do matters. What we do as leaders, and how we treat our staff, and how we do our jobs has a direct impact and effect on our patients. It's not the strongest species that survive or the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. What will your legacy be? Thank you all very much. I appreciate you being here today with me and giving me this opportunity to speak with you on this webinar. I will hand it over to the coordinators and open it up for any questions.
David, this is Jamie. Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation, and what an impactful video to wrap up with. I hate to do it, but we're going to switch gears and get into some of the questions that the attendees submitted during that presentation. I do want to take a moment just to remind everyone, if you have a question, there's still time to submit for the Q&A. You can use the question feature on your dashboard at any time. We'll get through as many questions as we can, but first question, David, why do you think engagement is so low, and what impact will it have if those statistics don't improve?
I think engagement overall, and I guess it depends on, when you ask that question, are you looking at global with everything, or are you just looking at healthcare? So I'm going to kind of narrow it down just to healthcare. I think we've gotten to a point in healthcare where we're doing so many little tasks that become monumental. You know, for example, before email started, we used to pick up the phone and have conversations, and things were actually accomplished very quickly. Now things are done through email, and email becomes, you know, overwhelming. So we have to look at all the little things that we do, because that's how we do our business now. And that's even transforming into, say, texting, right? So now everybody expects you to answer everything by text. You know, texts were supposed to be short little snippets. Our kids created it, and, you know, now we're doing it. But, you know, people write paragraphs. But it's not just that. It's you have to engage with your staff, and you have to prove that you engage with your staff. So now you have to do paperwork, and then you take that paperwork and you have to put it on a spreadsheet, and then you take that spreadsheet and you have to put it into something else to prove that you're doing the job that you were hired to do. And what you find is directors, for example, directors, vice presidents of surgical services are doing so many of these little tasks that they can't be strategic anymore. And part of that is you get frustrated and you start cutting corners. And when you start cutting corners, it becomes acceptable when you don't do certain things. Just like our clinical staff who cut corners, you know, if they cut corners on their counts, or they cut corners on the prep, or they cut corners on something, you know, what ends up being the result? And the second part of your question was, what do I think is going to happen? I think you're going to start seeing a lot more hospitals close their doors. Because we're not going to be able to sustain financially if our employees don't engage and take care of the patients well. Because through substandard care of our patients, we end up with surgical site wound infections, falls, collapses, caudes, etc. And we are no longer getting reimbursed for those episodes of care. So engagement is low because I think we're tasking ourselves with things that no longer matter. And then the result is going to be, you know, loss of healthcare institutions.
What impact will positive cultural change have on an organization?
Well, I can give you one example. At a client site that I went to in the Chicagoland area, we spent about 11 months there. We started our assessment in January, but the hospital CEO did not bring us on until about June. When we came on board and started an implementation in June, we were able to start deciphering all of the little issues and started working through them, working not just with the nursing staff, but we worked with the administration as well because they had to change. So it was really kind of a bottom-up, if you will, as well as a top-down. And in the middle, we met with our physician colleagues, and then we all three collaborated. All those groups started collaborating together, and in the end result to that was a more efficient operating room. They had better block times. They had better turnover times. So all those metrics were met. The end result was the staff were happier, administration was extremely pleased, and our physicians had much more satisfaction because they were able to do the things that they were there to do, which was surgery. The bottom line was also affected. We put about $7 million on the bottom line between June and November. So by doing a very hard press and working together collaboratively, we were able to really make that give that institution the financial stability that they needed.
Fantastic. We have time for about one more question since we're over our 60-minute allotment. Last question for the day. Can an organization be successful in today's healthcare market if they are struggling with their culture?
Absolutely. The answer is yes. But an organization has to begin a cultural shift and then realize with that cultural shift, any changes that you make are going to be difficult because culture is a very ingrained thing, and culture can trump strategy any day of the week. The key piece is being diligent in what you do and have the tenacity to see it through. Most cultural transformations won't occur for 18 months. That 18-month mark is when you're going to start seeing a great deal of transition happening with your staff and your organization. That 18-month to 2 years is when you're going to start seeing a huge shift. And after that 2-year mark, if you sustain that momentum and energy, you're going to see an actual different culture at the end of the day.
David, thank you so much for your time today in this presentation. Several attendees have chatted us while you were presenting, thanking you for the webinar. I want to remind everyone that one lucky attendee today will win a Visa gift card for completing the post-webinar survey, which will appear on your screen shortly. If you do not see the survey, please email us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. You must complete the survey to obtain the certificate for the CEU. You can see a calendar of upcoming webinars by visiting ortoday.com/webinar. And we look forward to seeing everyone next month. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.